Hi, welcome back to the Always Right podcast. I'm author Carissa DeLay.
And I'm author Jamie Vendera, and I'm pretty excited about today.
Yes, we have two special guests today who have their own podcast called Story Magic. And I'd like to introduce Miss Rachel and Miss Emily. Ladies, would you like to introduce yourselves?
Thank you so much for having us. We've been looking forward to this. It has been a long time coming, so we're so excited to be here. But I'm Rachel, one half of Golden May. I am the May half. And we are also authors and book coaches. Both of us published our debuts last year, which was really exciting. And we spend most of our time as pro book coaches helping other writers learn how to merge craft and process and what we're going to talk about today with their unique brains and bodies so that they can have a sustainable and fulfilling writing life.
Sweet. And Miss Emily?
Basically everything Rachel said. Yeah, I'm Emily. I'm the golden half of Golden May. And we just really love helping writers figure out what writing process is going to work for them. And that takes a lot of shapes, right? It takes what craft tools actually are going to work for you. What is the day-to-day process of writing going to look like for you? Like what actually brings you joy and fun? Because it just seems like there's so many writers out there who are struggling. And I know we're going to talk about that a lot today. But just who want to write so badly, and every time they sit down, it's just an existential crisis. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't have to be that way. And so that is what brought us to this work. And just why we keep showing up, because we just really, there's nothing more amazing than watching writers like really just take the reins of their own writing life and really find that fulfillment and joy. And so, yeah, that's what we do.
I have listened to several of your episodes. I sent one to Jamie. Jamie, did you listen? Mm-hmm.
Terrible. When did you send it?
Yesterday. I was like, you've got to listen to this.
I don't remember. I might listen. I promise you, ladies, I will. It's pretty bad, but I am. I'm not allowed to say ADHD anymore.
You're allowed to say it.
That's me.
I have it. He has it. Everybody has this.
Oh, that's right. You sent it when you said, I need you to go to Amazon and look up this author's books because we have a podcast with him Thursday.
And right after that, I said, we have Emily and we have Rachel. Here's their podcast. Listen to this episode and feel their vibe.
I you know what? I don't have anything to do for the next couple hours. So afterwards, I'm going to do that. In my defense, I have no defense. I think I live in hustle culture because I write, I teach rock stars, I run other companies. So yes, I don't remember anything.
He does. He has like too many tabs open for his ADHD.
Yeah, when I get really, really mad, I scream and I explode wine glasses with my voice. But that's
so,
another
Jamie,
topic.
This episode's for you because we are going to talk about hustle culture and the anti-hustle writing life. We need to get back to that anti-hustle effect. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to discuss it. And this is an intervention for you, Jamie.
I thought I wasn't anti-hustle because I've been talking about finishing Age of the Sigil for like over a year. Isn't that anti-hustle? Because I'm just
no, because you're hustling every other business. You can't focus on your writing.
So real.
All right, I'll go sit in the corner.
All right, so let's start. Let's talk to the listeners. Let's talk about what exactly is hustle culture before we get into how to fix hustle culture. Would you ladies like to kind of explain what hustle culture is?
We could talk about this all day. Yeah.
Yeah, go for it, Rach.
Okay. So, okay, I want to paint a picture for a second, and then I will talk, let's define it. When we first started Golden May, this is about 5 years ago now, we were both working full-time jobs. We decided, hey, we were going to start this business. We loved it. Then we worked, heads down for 2 or 3 years. Meanwhile, I had a baby. We're planning our lives, and slowly I could feel my body and my mind just chipping away until I woke up one day and had a meltdown and was like, I can't keep doing this anymore. What's happening? And there's so much that goes on in your life that makes life difficult, but then we feel this urge, this need to keep doing. We're not doing enough. There's just this feeling. There's always this pressure that you should be doing more. And we're going to talk about that word should a lot, but anytime you're I should be doing XYZ, or I should have done so much more stuff, or you're trying to quantify your productivity, you're worried about doing enough, or like succeeding or making enough money. Like
Mhm.
all of that is what hustle culture feels like inside
Hustle
your
culture
body.
feeds off that feeling.
It
It's
absolutely
literally
does.
like its own entity that just thrives off of your unable to type
Yes.
feelings.
No, it really is, because that's what it tells you, is that your unable to feelings are like a moral failing. And so your unable to feelings make you like less valuable as a person. And it creates all of these habits and behaviors that like drive you into that meltdown category where I was, where I realized like I was just massively burnt out. Hustle culture, to define it, is like the habit, the worldview, the mindset that you must like work excessively without regard for your own needs and relationships in order to reach like a measurement of success. And usually that's conflated with money, because we live in a capitalistic society. So a lot of this is very closely tied to Western society, capitalism, making money, because we have equated, like hustle culture at its core is equating your personal value with how much money you make and how successful you are. And so you work as hard as you can because that makes you feel like a valuable person in order to achieve this level of success. And it's completely draining. It like is a little, I'm like trying to picture, to me it's like a jagged lightning. No one can see this unless you're watching like this recording, but it's like this jagged lightning bolt between like who you are as a person, your value, your needs, and like
Back
what you're
and
able
forth,
to do.
yeah.
Yeah. So hustle culture just creates this complete barrier between you and how fulfilled you feel and how happy you feel and the creativity that comes from that.
Man, I've seen it like really, really grow, because I'm sure you ladies remember, Chris, I know because your books were coming out at the time, about 10 years ago, all of a sudden Kindle exploded. Maybe it was longer, 10 years ago. Everybody was writing, oh, there's a 50 Shades of Grey, there's a Twilight. Let me copy that. Let me write a dozen books and have them released in the next 6 months. And bam, 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 bam. And then social media with TikTok, with Instagram. I have students who aren't authors, who are singers, and they're burnt. They call, we'll be in a lesson, they cry because like, oh my God, I can't keep up with it. My Patreon only made 30 grand this month. It dropped 20 grand. I only put out 500 videos this month. And I'm like, that's no life
Yes.
to
Yeah.
live.
Yeah.
There's we got to quit equating with, oh, money, money, money. But I mean, we're bombarded with this every day. We look online, even with the authors on TikTok, it's the same thing. They got to put on, a lot of them put on a front, like, look how successful I am. And then you feel like, oh, I have to compete with that. I must work harder. I must churn out, a dozen books for this series. So it's a vicious
Now,
cycle.
and now with
Yeah.
AI, it almost makes it even more of a push for people that, well, AI can help you do it faster. But then it's like, again, something we're going to further in this statement is that if we do that too much, we're going to lose our creative potential for success. Like it's not going to be as successful because it's just
Yeah.
And we're
It's
go
rooted
ahead.
it's rooted in this like, right, it comes down to capitalism and this idea, if you think about it, right? Capitalism is rooted in this competition mindset of like, I've got a factory, you've got a factory. My factory is only going to survive if it can beat your factory in output, how much money it's making and how fast it's getting product out, right? And so all of a sudden we become the factory. And so if you think about it in those terms, it's like you can start to see it everywhere where it's like, okay, I have to show up every day at the exact same time. I have to make more than I did yesterday. I have to be consistent. I have to be disciplined. I have to, like it's this, and I have to do better than that other factory because if I don't, I'm going to go out of business. Right. And doing better than that other factory is equated to making more product, right? And making more money faster and better than the other factory is doing. And it's just, that's not how creativity works. And it's not how life works.
No.
But we've equated it that way in our culture and therefore in our minds.
Well, and a great kind of parallel to thinking of creativity, our minds are not creative unless it's quiet and able to function properly without all the busy noise. So what makes you think that when you're busy that you're going to be able to be creative on the outside superficially, when your internal side can only be creative when it's feeling that calm? So it's the same idea. But I feel at the same time, society, capitalism, has made it like and I mentioned this in our notes, a badge of honor
Yes.
to be able to say, I've done this, I've done that. Like they're putting like little brownie badges on their sash of what you've
Yeah.
completed. And I met someone the other day. Like I always tell people I have functioning ADHD because I do a lot of things, but I can't do the same thing consistently. I will forever be married to my husband because that's my constant. But I do in other parts of my life, I like change. So there's change, and I like to write. We do the podcast. I like to create ads and stuff. I like to format. I do tattoos. I work in a hair salon. I'm a college student. For most people, that'd be like, you're all over the place. But I'm also self-aware. So I just had this conversation with my husband. I said, I thought I was going to try and finish out my degrees this spring, and it was going to be a huge undertaking. And I was like, you know what? I'm mentally not going to be ready for that. And I feel like I'm not going to give myself the credit of being a good student and a good mom and a good this and that. So I'm like, I'm not going to do it. I'll just take my time. It's the timeline doesn't matter now. So you kind of have to step back and say, whose timeline are you on? Are you on your own timeline? Or are you on what everybody expects you to do and what it's going to look like? Oh, look what I did in this much time. So
yeah.
And that's where the word should comes in, I think,
Mhm.
is oftentimes you can find hustle culture buried in the word should. So if let's say you woke up, I used to tell myself that I had to that I had to wake up at 5 a.m. and like get my writing in before 7,
I
or
was
it
going
wasn't
to
going to
mention
happen.
that.
That's Jamie.
The
And
5 a.m. rush.
I like to do that. Like so I was on deadline last fall, and so it involved a lot of 5 a.m. wake ups. And so I was like, okay, by the time, my deadline's over for my book and I start a new project, or like don't start a new project, then like whatever, right? I'm not going to be waking up at 5 a.m. But I've actually woken up at 5 a.m. more days than not since I recovered from being sick in the last like week, just because I really enjoy it. Like I enjoy that hour. It's when my mind is really creative. But there's no should attached to that. There's no like there's no voice in the back of my head saying you should wake up at 5 a.m. because if you don't, you're a bad person, right? That's essentially what that hustle culture voice is saying, is like, if you're not acting like a machine, you are a failure and you're not worthy of safety, of happiness, right? Of other people's love. And so that's where that should comes in. It's like, who's telling you anything should be, right? Like the should implies there's some kind of external force that's telling you to do something that's not coming from within. And so I think it's like
I feel
that
like I got
flag.
that growing up. I got that growing up from a whole different generation of my grandmother and my mother.
Mm-hmm.
My grandmother she had 8 children, she had 30 some grandchildren, all these things. And she felt she should have her husband's food ready. She should do this, shouldn't do that. And then I watched my mom do it, like, oh, you should fix your husband's plate. And I remember when my husband and I first started dating, and I was like, go get your food or whatever. And she's like, you're not going to fix his plate. I'm like, why? Because it's that mentality of certain things that we're expected to do because cult or generations before us did it. I'm like, why should I have to do that? No. Like, I mean, even in all facets, not just writing. So we look at authors that put out books, like, oh, they should have another book out by now. Well, maybe something's going on in their life. And you get in that mindset, like, oh my, if I don't do this, people are going to be very disappointed. Let them be disappointed.
Carissa, way back when I was churning out all those fiction books, it wasn't, I got to get it done. I got to get it done.
1979?
Yeah. It was, I knew other authors like, I'm churning out 10,000 or more words per day, and that's all I do. The 5 a.m. thing for me is cool because it's not about I got to get it done. It's I'm just waking up and my mind feels creative. And whenever I've tried to force writing, that's when, if I have that hustle culture mentality in that moment, I can't. I mean, I feel like it's just, I'm bored with it. I don't feel it. So, but I can get up and be
writer's
creative.
block from those types.
I don't believe in writer's block. It's either it's either you're excited or you're bored. It's another topic.
So,
But
with that question, ladies, when you write, are you more of a morning person or are you more of a nighttime person when it comes to actual creativity, or is it random?
This is so funny. So I am like, I tried the 5 a.m. thing. No, it is not for me. I am a night owl. I could write from midnight to 5 a.m.
Yes.
Great.
okay,
I do that.
so you're Team Rachel and I'm Team
Absolutely
Emily.
not.
Sorry, ladies.
So Emily, you're a 5 a.m.er?
Oh yeah. I can't write.
Awesome.
If at like 9 o'clock, my brain is off. It's done.
Yeah.
That's when I'm getting going. I'm like, 9 o'clock. That's the second half of my day.
Yes!
Let's do it.
I just told my husband, I said, I realized that these daytime hours, I cannot sit and write. I'll be like, I've got this stuff in my head, and I'll go, I'm like, oh, I can't do this. But then at night, I'll turn on my video games, and I'm like one of those people I can multitask.
Me
Turn my
too.
video games on. I'll be just playing, and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna fly into a match. Oh no, I'm gonna go write part of this chapter. I'm gonna go do this.
Yeah.
I am more creative from the hours of 10 p.m. till 2 a.m. That's
Yes.
just me.
Same. Yeah. And so one of the other options that we sent you to talk about today was like process, because it differs between the person. Every single person is unique. I am also neurodivergent. Like I have different habits. We all have different lives. The person that I was before I had kids is not the same person that I am now. Like every single person is so unique in what their brain and their body needs. Especially when you factor in things like chronic illness and like what if you're a caretaker or like what the circumstances of your lives are. And so hustle culture is like so fucking annoying to me because it makes you feel like you're messing up if you don't show up in a specific way. But like the system is rigged. You can't show up that way. Like not everybody can do it. So for me, I used to feel so much shame and guilt because waking up at 5 a.m., my brain's not on. I can't do it. But like as soon as my daughter goes to bed, that's when things start to light up. Like it's like a little physical shift in my body when I take my contacts out after I put my daughter to bed and I put my glasses on and I'm like, I'm ready to go. My eyes are open. Let's write. But it took experimenting to like get there to figure out what worked once I let go of like what are the shoulds. I like had to listen to what I felt. Yeah. What I felt like would work for me.
Now, I'm glad you said that because anyone who wants to write a book can write a book, but I feel like so many people fail because of that.
Yeah.
They read a book, the 5 a.m. hustle, all the nighttime. You have to find your own flow, and it may be you're a 10-minute-a-day writer, or maybe, it's just getting started and you can write for an hour a day, but you got to find, nobody's the same. You have to find your pattern for sure.
Yes, you do.
You have to find your pattern, but even still, I think there's like a 2-step process, right? There's finding what works for you and like listening internally, but there's also that pressure of like, even once you know what works for you, you can still put all that expectation on yourself to like have an output that's a certain way or like force yourself to show up, right? Like every day. Like I don't show up at 5 a.m. every day. I fit, right, that mold of the 5 a.m. writer. But if I have that should pressure on me that I should show up every day, or I should show up today, even though I feel like crap, or my daughter didn't sleep, or I'm sick, right? And then you start to put those pressures on yourself. Like it's both. I think it's like, it's finding out what works for you, but then it's also figuring out like, what is hustle culture telling you? Because I do think while hustle culture is really sort of universal in terms of like how it's impacting all of us, it also like the voices come up individually, right? And I think it often takes the form of like our parents or our grandparents or teachers or like people who've spoken to us in the past, right? And so it says slightly different things to all of us and it feeds on slightly different fears for all of us. And so the first step, I think, or one of the steps while you're figuring out and listening to yourself and figuring out what works for you, you also have to figure out like what is hustle culture saying to you and like what fears is it feeding on and what beliefs do you have like ingrained so that you can start to rewrite them. Because if those are still there, like knowing what process works for you is still going to be really fraught.
But I also think we need to be a little careful with not masking when a writer is listening or our listeners trying to explain that. So I feel like there's a different energy between hustle culture and you feel like you have to and you should do this versus, no, I want to do this. I just want to get into a regimen. So there is a difference between what your desires are and what you should be doing based on what society and hustle culture is telling you to do. So if you want to get up and create a habit, because we've said, if you want to actually do that, just get up and do it. Like you just got to start the habit, even if it's for 3 minutes, 5 minutes or 30 minutes, just get up and write. But if you're not wanting to have that mentality, then just be aware that you're not wanting to step into the hustle culture, but you're wanting to step into like an environment of regiment. There's a difference, I feel like, because like Jamie, I don't think when he's writing and getting up and because his brain's working and that's what he's wanting to do, is the writing part is not his hustle culture. His other life is hustle culture. And so he has to learn to say no in the other part of it and yes in the other part, if that makes sense.
I train and tour too much.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you're exactly right. And I think that there's so many different ways to make progress in a writing life, in general. And for some people, the routine works, the habit works, the regiment works. And so in our community, we've put together this whole course on like building a sustainable and consistent writing routine. Like we use the word sustainable and consistent because sustainability just means you can do whatever it is you're doing for a long time. And consistent just means you're showing up regularly, whatever that means. So there's an intersection of those two things, I think, in the anti-hustle writing life. What is sustainability? What is consistency? How do you find them? That's your magic zone, right? Like being able to figure out what that means. And a lot of people we run a writing program called Tenacious Writing. And a lot of people in our program like really buck against the word routine because it's like so difficult to maintain a routine, and the word routine feels so rigid, and like the word like regiment can feel like I have to do the same thing every day. No, you don't have to do the same thing every day at every time. So we end up calling it like habit or practice or ritual. Like it doesn't matter. Yeah, ritual. Like it doesn't matter what you call it, but you're trying to find the intersection between sustainability and consistency, and what does that look like for you? And so much of that comes with like hustle culture tells us rigidity, anti-hustle tells us flexibility, adaptability. Your life is going to change. You're going to get sick. You're going to have this season come. You're going to be on deadline. You're going to not. Like life in and of itself does not stick to routine most of the time. And so we don't approach writing like that. It's really difficult for some people. This is such a major aspect. This is why it's so unique. For some people, routine works so well. And for other people, like they're never going to make that work. It's not about making the routine work. It's about being in the headspace where you can show up, because progress will happen when you show up. It doesn't matter when or how often or what you do. It just matters that you will make progress when you can free yourself from the pressure to show up and to like do what you need to do when you feel like, not necessarily when you feel like it, because sometimes we have to do things we don't feel like doing, but showing up in a place that comes from like that internal motivation rather than the hustle external pressures should motivation.
I don't know, I should probably approach writers like this, but like I work with a lot of songwriters and recording artists, and they're at home, and it's, the fears you mentioned. It's like, oh, if I don't do this for my kids, or I got this and I got to run to my parents. I'm like, you know what? You record on a digital audio workstation, right? Yeah. I said, all I want you to do, you're going to try a routine for 5 days a week, but I don't care if you keep it a routine, but go down and turn on your computer. And then if you want to record, you do. But if you don't, at least stay there for 3 to 5 minutes and maybe try to record one line. And if you're not feeling it and you're feeling you got to go do this and you don't make it that day, that's fine, because one of those days they're going to end up in recording for 3 hours and like, wow, I got so much done on that one day. That's fine. At least they're, like you said, I like the word habit or the ritual. It could be a ritual going in and at least initiating that you do want to do this. Why do you want to be an author? You want to put up we want to express ourselves, but it don't happen by you sitting there thinking about it. You actually got to write the book. So that's the hardest thing I see with any artist I work with, is just getting started several times a week.
Yeah, getting started is so.
Go ahead.
Just getting started is so hard because so often we don't have any self-trust. And if you're a writer, like, so yeah, so for a long time, like, I didn't have the self-trust that I could show up consistently because I hadn't done it before. So of course I didn't have the self-trust that I could show up, right? And so what I ended up falling back on is hustle culture. Hustle culture likes to say, well, you're only going to show up, right? If we go back to the metaphor of like, you're a factory, right? Well, you're only going to show up to work if your manager's like yelling in your ear, right? And you're only going to get higher output if that manager is like guilting you and shaming you into doing so, right? And so when you don't have any self-trust that you can do something because you've never done it before, it's really easy to slip into shaming and guilting yourself into doing something, and that's not sustainable.
And it's not high quality either.
Right.
I mean, it's not going to be your best work.
Yeah, and so
your creativity is impacted by that then.
Yeah, and so fundamentally when you're trying to like embrace anti-hustle, most of the deep work that you have to do is building that self-trust that you can trust yourself to show up in a way that's fun and that you love, right? And we could go down a whole nother rabbit hole of how like fun feels like a threat to hustle culture, right? Because fun is lazy. But it's like it's learning how to feel like you have to teach yourself how to feel good showing up so that you can start to trust that you're going to show up. And it's a process that doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Rachel.
I have a question for you two. And this is a little experiment that we run. So here's my question. And it's slightly loaded because I have a point. If I ask you, or if I tell you, you need to lower your expectations for yourself, what reaction do you have to that?
I have two reactions. Younger me and me now. So the younger me, if you would have asked me that question, I would have been offended that I can't lower my expectations. How dare you ask me to do that? Because my expectations, I have to meet this point of me. But there was a pivotal point in my 30s after having 4 girls and a set of twins that were 2, and my youngest was a newborn. I was overwhelmed and all these things, and I was exhausted. And my old self would have told me not to stop, just keep going, you'll figure it out later. You can't take a nap, you can't do these things, you know? So there was a point where I was like, you know what? That's my mother and my grandmother speaking to me. My body's run down. I hear you. I'm going to listen. I'm going to go take a nap. And I take power naps all the time. I'll text my husband, don't call me. I'm taking a power nap. You know, like power napping 45 minutes or whatever. It turns into like an hour and a half. You know, whatever. I still kind of lower the 45-minute expectation and I just overachieve and do an hour and a half.
Exactly. Love that.
So the old me growing up, based on my mom and grandmother's mentality of where a female should be, would have been like, don't lower my expectations. Me now, I look at my expectations as, why am I shooting so high? I'm not going to achieve that. I'm going to fail myself. Being self-aware. So I'm self-aware. So the new me would have said, that's fine. Let's lower it.
Yeah. Jamie, what about you?
Okay, so it's a little different for me
Mhm.
because I remember years ago, a couple different conversations, over the years. Someone's like, Jamie, how did you get on Mythbusters? How did you write dozens of books? How did you work with all these rock stars? And then the other conversation would be like, Jamie, did you see that the vocal coach, they put out a new book? What it's outselling yours. It's not about expectations. I'm in competition with myself. I don't really worry about other coaches, about other authors. There's a reason, and I don't know if you've ran into this. We haven't, but I have in the coaching world. We reached out or you reached out, so we're doing this podcast. This won't work for everybody because some will be like, Emily and Rachel, they're our competition. We can't, our podcast has got to be bigger than theirs. I don't have that
We
mentality.
both
One of
don't
my
have
books,
that mentality.
yeah, one of my books has a dozen vocal coaches at least with articles that teach differently than me because they're friends. They're not competition. I'm in competition with myself. So I could not raise my expectations or lower my expectations for you because I'm comparing myself to what I did yesterday. And I'm always competing to do better. Carissa won't agree because I'm still writing Age of the Sigil book 4, but
Well,
that's an ongoing joke.
actually, I'm going to agree that I've known Jamie since essentially 2011 when I denied him not taking my books on. But I've gotten Jamie and I have become pretty much best friends over these years, and I will say he's definitely in competition with himself and no one else. He and I get along because we don't compete with others. We're more of a networking. We like to help others, even if it means that it's going to push us down. We're not trying to like, if somebody else is in our way, let them go. We're not in a competition with them. So expectation wise, I can agree that's what Jamie's like.
I asked this question because I think most people that I've asked, and I've asked a lot of people, have both of these very similar reactions. Starts with defensiveness. How dare you?
Yeah.
I'm never gonna. Or some sort of competition with like, so I'm gonna say both of those sound pretty good. Both of those sound pretty right. Because there's this ingrained belief that we have to be doing so much, or we have to be measuring ourselves against something. And just this simple question of me asking, and not necessarily you guys, but like asking, why won't you lower your expectations, tends to elicit like a feeling of that's failure. Like,
Yeah.
fuck that. Why? Why do we think that? No, it's not. No, it absolutely is not. But that means that we're measuring ourselves against something. And a lot of people are not aware of what that something is. And so by lowering the bar, they feel like they're failing. And Emily mentioned self-trust earlier. When you're in a spot of like really struggling to even show up or to build a routine or a habit or whatever it is you want to call it, you have very little self-trust in yourself. The only way to build such self-trust is to show up. But showing up with high expectations is shooting yourself in the foot. Like you're going to create these narratives of shame because you're going to show up expecting to do a lot. Well, you've not built that habit. And so it's not going to last. And then you create this cycle of shame. And so we've really found that to build self-trust, which is critical in the anti-hustle writing life, is to go back to baseline 0. We expect nothing of what it means to show up for writing today. And that's
that's cool.
Yeah, daily, baseline 0, because you have to build it. You have to build it. We also use the metaphor a lot of like working out. Like writing is an endurance sport. It is.
I was literally going to say the workout culture and hustle culture are literally melded together.
Yeah.
Because you see people like, oh my gosh, look at me today. I'm like, oh, I don't. I personally, to each their own. I do not want that ritual of working out. I don't like to work out, period.
Yeah.
I know Jamie likes to work out. My kids work out, they do their thing. I am more of my brain is a mental workout. So for me, like I'll go walk or whatever, but I don't want to have to like be committed to it all the time. I don't want to have to be expected to do that and have to like show pictures of my progress. Yeah, I definitely see that in that same world.
Yeah, I mean, but nowadays, like I can sustainably and consistently write like 1,500 words a day, pretty good. That feels good to me. I've spent years building those muscles. Like I could absolutely not write that much 5 years ago, but I spent a lot of time like building up that endurance, building up that self-trust, and also I don't care if I don't write 1,500 words. That's like a good zone for me. But I got there from working to like build that up. But so many people start with like these massively high expectations. They can't hit them. I'm gonna write 1,000 words a day. No, you're not. No, you're not. Period.
If you haven't been writing for months, you're not gonna. I could just tell you because your body doesn't believe you. And that's just like, that's not a bad thing. That's not a moral failure. It's just a fact. It's just reality. If you've never done something before, your body doesn't believe that it can do it. And so you have to train it. And that starts with what Rachel was saying, like baseline 0. Like I had a client who she would show up in these huge spurts. And so she would like produce a ton and then she couldn't produce for a super long time. And when she came to me, it had been like a year. Right. And that didn't feel good for her. Important because some people like to produce in spurts, but for her, that didn't feel good. And she wanted to build a sustainable practice. Even the assignments, she was paying me a lot of money to meet with her every week to complete assignments and, all this stuff. And she couldn't complete the assignments. There were weeks when she would send me nothing. And it was because, in working together, we figured out it was because she didn't have she had never proven to herself that she could produce something consistently. And so we just threw everything, all of our other goals out the window. And it was like, okay, you're going to show up 3 times a week to write 1 paragraph. And if you only turn in 3 paragraphs to me, you have succeeded. And of course, like you were saying, Jamie, like she sat down, she wrote a paragraph, and then there were days when that was all she could do. And there were also days when she wrote for 2 hours. But that baseline, right? Like 1 step above 0, like that's where you have to start. And it feels so icky because it doesn't feel like enough. And you have to work through that because if you keep setting those, like, I'm going to go from 0 to 100, it's not going to happen. It's just not. You can shame and guilt yourself for a week, but then you're going to burn out.
This is way before AI, but my first book, I went through all of that, so I probably was living in hustle culture, didn't realize it. And I would get so mad and I'd put it away for months and I get started and I rewrite this. 128 pages took me 4 years. My third book was 128 pages and it took me 3 days. Yeah. I got in even when I write now, and I don't know if this is like really good to teach. I'm just weird, but I don't. A lot of writers they'll plot out like I got to finish this chapter or I got these bullet points to finish that. When I write fiction, I don't. I go in almost like a child, like I'm watching a new movie. I'm like, oh, I wonder where this is taking me. I typically don't have a plot, and even if I have an overall story about a mermaid or an alien, I don't know beginning, middle, or end at all. I just start writing it, and whatever comes out comes out. That keeps me flowing, my creativity flowing, and I don't get stuck, or I don't feel like, oh, I got to hurry up and finish this. I don't care if it takes me 3 days or 3 months. It doesn't, or a year. It doesn't matter. As long as I'm staying creative.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
No, you
Go
go
ahead.
ahead. I'm about to cough.
So we've been talking a lot about this hustle culture, this culture that brands us as whether we're successful or unsuccessful, and how we hold ourselves accountable for that. And it's literally an imaginary accountability because no one's holding us account. It's like a superficial entity that we literally can't see that's just nagging at us. But
Unless you're working for a newspaper.
I mean, that's a different deadline, though. It's like, hey, I mean, I feel like, there's certain deadlines you got to meet, like
Yeah.
taxes, things like that.
Let's not go there right now.
Oh yeah, there are some hardline deadlines, but those are data. I feel like important. So data important things have a time sensitive narrative. Like, hey, don't publish this thing that's 3 months old. We need this now. So I get where hustle culture is with that. And you almost have to mentally say, can I handle that? But when I'm talking about, my computer screen went off because what I'm talking about is more of the people that use creativity to put out product, whether it's songwriting, whether it's, social media content, whether it's podcasting, coming up with good topics. I mean, we didn't think that we'd have this many topics when we first started. We thought, oh gosh, how far is this going to go? Like 50 episodes. And then we started getting into it like, oh, we should tackle that. Oh, we should tackle that now. But even with writing books, how do we approach anti-hustle for our writers and the writing community and people who are listening? That how do they overcome this? So let's discuss that now.
So
How
I
do we
think
overcome?
we have 3, we call them tenets of anti-hustle. And a lot of it has to do with like reframing narratives, like living an anti-hustle life is about letting go of hustle culture, reframing your expectations. But it starts with these 3 tenets because these are the core beliefs that we hold as anti-hustle writers that like bring us into an anti-hustle writing life. The first one is that your worth is not tied to your output. And what we really mean by that is that we've got to stop believing that like how good of a writer we are is tied to how many words we write in a day. It's not. For me, like setting daily word count goals is like really effective. I get a massive dopamine hit when I like hit my goal. Woohoo, that works for me. It doesn't work for everybody, but I'm no longer tying like how I value myself and how
That's your
worthy I
personal
am.
goal. That is not a goal
Exactly.
set by society or capitalism
Exactly.
or any kind of world like your TikTok or Instagram saying, hey, this many words a day or you're failing. So
Exactly.
you have set your own realistic goal. That's the difference.
Yeah, over years of experimenting.
Yeah,
Right,
knowing
like
your
we talked
potential,
about,
you can
knowing
do.
what I can do. And if
Yeah.
I miss a day, like I don't have a crisis of faith or an existential crisis that like I am somehow less than. So the first tenet is your worth is not tied to your output. Your worth is inherent. We are worthy as human beings as we are. So like that is our first belief. Our second belief is that your success is not determined by someone else's standard. So we are letting go of like what other people tell us is success. And we're going to reframe that. So whatever that ends up looking like, whether that's publishing a success, finishing a draft is success, we reframe that to what is our success? What does that mean for us? The third one, and this one I think is the most important one. Your brain and body deserve rest. I didn't say your brain and body should have rest. They deserve it. Your brain and your body deserve rest. Power naps, days off, like so much of the work that we do with our clients, with the writers in our community, is we are factoring rest into the equation as like the biggest deal, because you cannot create sustainably or consistently without refilling the well, without taking care of yourself, without meeting your needs. And this is especially important for people that do have chronic illness or that spent like expound a lot of energy to the people around them rather than within them. So your brain and your body deserve rest. When we believe those three things, like those are the beliefs, then we can start to approach writing a little differently, where like you wake up one day, you're feeling like you're writing, but okay, so this is for me. Yesterday, I was going to take like this leisurely little walk, and I went with a friend, and it ended up being 5 miles. And that was way too long. I should not have done that. I'm recovering from an illness. Why did I do that? We were chatting. It felt really good. So this morning I wake up and I'm like physically dead.
You can't walk.
Yes. My legs like really hurt. So today we're going to flip a coin to see if we get some writing done today, because I'm very tired. But I deserve rest. So like when it comes down to the questions of, what do I want to do today? That's my first belief. I deserve rest. Knowing that I deserve rest, what's my choice going to be? Do I want to write? Do I feel good about writing? Or am I going to take a day off because I deserve rest? So we can approach our writing habit believing these three things and starting to reframe the way that we look at productivity, the way that we look at showing up, the way that we look at success and expectations. So ultimately, like, we value ourselves over society's expectations, and that changes a lot when you think of what your goals are, how you measure your progress, how you set timelines, how you navigate within a writing community, how you talk to yourself with your inner critic narratives, how you compare yourself to others. It changes all of it. So we start with those three things, and we can then start to ask ourselves, well, what would my writing life look like if I believed I was more important than the word count, than the daily word count? What would my writing life look like if I stopped measuring my success by the standard I saw on Instagram? What would that mean to me? What would my writing life look like if I treated my brain and my body like they did deserve rest?
Like a temple.
Like a temple.
Yeah.
What would that look like? And we can start like changing those fundamental beliefs that hustle culture teaches us into something new, into something that is going to work for us, that comes from within. It's a process, it does not happen overnight, and it certainly is not something that like you flip a switch and suddenly, oh, I'm anti-hustle. Like, no, our society still exists. We still live in capitalism. We still work other jobs, most of us. So like, it's a process. It takes time to reframe that. But we do all of this, no shame. There's no shame allowed in the anti-hustle writing life.
Something that I often will say to people when they're like, oh my gosh, this or this, I'm like, you still have your birthday. I mean, they can do whatever. I mean, so you're not you got your birthday. They can't take that from you. So why are you worried, about this minuscule thing? Like when you go somewhere else, something's going to change. This is going to be in the past or whatever. But to further on what you were saying about, overcoming anti-hustle and doing all these things to refocus the temple of your existence and maintain yourself. When you start finding who you are, you're also going to be able to tap more into, I feel like, your inner voice that is who you are as a writer, and not tap into a writer that you are not. I feel like a lot of times writers are like, oh, I gotta be, which I love certain types of writers. Jamie likes different types of writers. And like, oh, I gotta be like them. But be your own version. Maybe their style, like I like how Dan Brown is like short chapters and every chapter is a new scene. But we write different genres and I have a different type of voice, but I like his style. So it's kind of like find your own voice, but you cannot find your own voice if you're constantly listening to everyone else's.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
What about you, Emily? What do you think as far as the anti-hustle mentality?
Yeah, I mean, these tenets I think are really, really important, and they're kind of right there what we're aiming for. And I think it's also important to note that this, and Rachel said this, but to just like emphasize that this doesn't happen overnight, right? Hustle culture is everywhere. It's everywhere. It's not just in writing and creativity and like working out. It's in everything that we do. And it's all around us. And I think that the first thing you have to do is you have to start to recognize what it's saying to you and like what beliefs you have that you've taken from hustle culture that are guiding your actions and holding you back and like making you feel like crap. Because once you have those specific beliefs, you can start to say, okay, I believe these things right now. No shame, right? This is just where I'm at. And these are the things I want to believe instead, right? And when you can start, like I used to really like believe that I couldn't show up consistently. I didn't believe that I could finish a book because I spent so much time, revising and never actually getting to the end. Like it took me years to get to the end of a book because I didn't believe that I could do it. So I wanted, right, a belief that I wanted to grow was like, I can get to the end of a draft. And so like identifying like what are those beliefs and then how can you start to prove to your body that those beliefs are true? So even if you don't believe them yet, right? Future you believes them. And so how does future you show up, right? How does the version of you who believes that belief that you want to adopt, like how do they show up day to day? And if you start to do that in the tiniest ways possible, right, you can start to train your body that those beliefs are true. And this is a process and it takes a while. And it's, I think one of the hardest things for me was the fact that I would be trying to do this and trying to live in a different way. And society and like everyone around me, all my friends and loved ones would be shouting hustle culture things back to me, whether intentionally or not, just by living their own hustle culture existence. Like they were putting pressure on me to do the same. And so the third thing that I think is super, super important is finding people that also are trying to untangle these hustle culture beliefs alongside you is really, really important. Like talking to you guys, like these kinds of conversations, and like our community is full of people who are anti-hustle. And so we talk about it all the time and we show each other all the time how we're trying to work through it, how we're finding our own ways. And that like gives me hope that I'm not just like this isolated, like that I'm not crazy for wanting to live in a new way,
And
so I
as a
think those are
parent,
important.
and sorry, Jamie, as moms, we understand sometimes,
Hey, I'm a mom.
Dog and cat mom.
Yes, there we go. I have a 37-year-old son.
Yes, but you're not a mom.
Oh, okay.
There is a difference. There is absolutely a difference in how you approach things versus a mom approaching things. And I heard this talk one time, and it was great because there was a piece of it that I really have held on to when it comes to just general assessment. And the speaker said, if you tell your child, you're bad, eventually that child will grow up to think they're bad, and that's all they can be. So it's the same idea. If you tell yourself you're not going to be able to finish a chapter, you're not going to be able to finish this novel, you are not, because you've already told yourself you're not. So mentally, you've prepared and strengthened your muscle to be against you. And so you almost have to retrain and reassess who you are and where you want to be and continue. It's almost like that habit, that 3 to 7 days for form a habit and then like 21 days to break it. It's the same idea. You have to take 21 days to break your habit of not believing in yourself. You have to, and what's really hard is self-love. Self-love comes in as an equation against hustle culture.
Yes.
Which is really hard to assess when we feel like we're failing. Like, I'm so rock bottom. I have so many clients that are on the depression level where they're taking things because they just feel like they can't, and it's just one of those things that society has put so much expectation on us as new moms, as writers, as songwriters, as, and I just said this to my husband. I don't want to be so rich that I have to live to a certain standard because I wouldn't do it. I can't do that. Like, I want to do my own thing. I just want to be happy in what I'm doing. And that's how
I think that depression comes from like so many writers think, like Emily, you were saying, you gotta make these tiniest of changes. That's the problem. Somebody like it's got to be an instant change for so many people. I gotta hit this goal. I'm setting a goal of 3,000 words a day. My book's got to be out in January. If I don't, I'm a failure. And then that's where the depression kicks in.
If we tell people I've got a book coming out in the spring, and then we don't hit the mark of the spring, like I failed everybody I told that, and they're probably like, okay, that's fine. There might be a small, minute people that will hold you to that, but those people don't matter because they're probably not going to read your book, and they're probably not going to review it.
Nobody cares as much as you do. Nobody cares. Nobody cares.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I think when I first started to think about these things, hustle culture felt like a given. Like like there's no other way that I could succeed not doing this. And we talk a lot about how ambition is still like wildly possible, anti-hustle life. Like I've accomplished way more now as far as like I've published 2 books, we've built a successful business, like I have constant clients already, like I've done so much more now than what I used to do, like living in hustle culture. And to me, I've already proved it to myself. But if you're like in the trenches right now, it's really, really hard to like let this go and think that there's another possibility. So when I was in those trenches, what made it easier to me was to just think of it like it's just an experiment. Like I don't have to commit to this new writing style. I don't have to like commit to these new beliefs. Those beliefs are ridiculous. Like believing that I could take a day off and I will actually do more if I take a day off, that doesn't make sense. That's counterintuitive. I can't do that. So I decided like, this is a hypothesis. Why don't I test it to see if it's true? And like approaching it that way gave me a lot of flexibility in like what I was willing to believe and how I was able to prove it to myself, because I wasn't committing. I was trying. I was going to try it out. I'm going to test it. So when we're talking about this, like I think if you're in those trenches, what if it's just a hypothesis? What if it's
the worst
just
that can happen? It works.
The worst, like, yeah. And
if
it doesn't work,
believe it till you do it.
You're not going to
comes
believe
back
it.
right to that idea. And if you can approach that as like, oh man, that's depressing, or you can approach it as like, okay, well, what if I just acted as if something was true? Let's see. Is it true? I don't know. So for instance, it took me so long to finish. It took me like 5 years to finish a draft. And then once I had finished that draft, it took me 3 years to revise it. So then I sold that book. And they told me I had to write the sequel in 8 months. And I was like, I've never done that before. Right. And so there was like, my brain was like, absolutely, I cannot do that. Right. I've never done it before. I can't do it. Right. And so I approached it as like, well, what if I could? How would I show up? Right. And it's like, well, all I can do is get my butt in the chair, X days a week. And like it works out, and like let's just see. Maybe I can, maybe I can't. And I was 5 weeks late on my deadline, but I still got it done in much closer.
No, that's a huge jump from 8 years,
right? But it was an experiment. I didn't go like I have to do it, right? I was like, if I don't make it, I don't make it. It doesn't make me a bad person. I just tell my publisher, sorry, right? Like that doesn't. And so I really had to have that belief in myself. And like, okay, we're going to experiment, see if we can do this in 8 months. And if we don't, like that world is not going to end. I'm not going to die. Right.
Yes.
And I was able to do that. But now I'm like, okay, now I have to create a book to sell on Sub. I've never done that before. Right. And so instead of putting all this pressure on myself to be like, oh my God, you have to do it in a certain way, I'm just kind of like, okay, let's just see what happens if I try to sell, on a submission package.
Do you feel like your writing was
I don't know.
the same quality both times?
Yeah, in the end, once it was revised, it was. The first draft was probably rougher, but the second draft took 3 weeks. So like,
but
I did a developmental pass in 3. Yeah, once I finished the end, because I had to teach myself that I'm going to figure out what this book is about when I reach the end. Right. And I didn't believe that. Even with the second one, I was kind of like, I don't know if this is true, because the first one was such a fraught process where I kept revising the first half so many times before I finally finished the draft. I didn't really believe that like I could just write a draft from beginning to end and it would work until it worked. Right. But I had to just the thing I set for myself was I'm just going to keep showing up. I'm not going to stop. And then eventually, I figured out what I was capable of. And I think that that's, if we start with like, I have to do X in number of days and you've never done that before, like that's your only goal, right? That's your only like process. And you don't have like a day-to-day thing and your worth is tied to that. Like it's you probably not going to happen. You have to kind of untangle that stuff first and prove to yourself what you're capable of.
It could have been a deadline. Like what was the book that took like 80 years to get the second book and it wasn't as great? The woman that what was the oh my gosh, I can see the cover of the book. It's got birds on it. It was really good. What is that book? And she was like in her 80s before she came out with the second one.
So she wrote her first book when she was 3.
No, like she was oh my gosh.
Are you talking about the only book I can think of that came out that much later was like Harper Lee's second novel?
No.
Okay. I'm
My
not
brain,
sure.
my brain's I'm gonna Google this. So okay, while I'm
It'll be
Googling
Jamie
this,
Vendera with Age of the Sigil if I don't
yeah,
get busy.
while I'm Googling this, ladies, I would like for you to share your books. Like, tell us about your books real quickly, and tell us about where people can find them, and then tell us about your podcast and all the links that people can go to find you. Because listen, people, I love their energy, so you're gonna want to listen to theirs too.
Emily, do you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah. So my book is it's a fantasy romance, and you can find it anywhere books are sold. It's Behind the Crimson Curtain by E.B. Golden, and it's about a con artist who is trying to rebuild her life in the ashes of a fallen government, and she's also trying to deal with a past romance with a man who is now high in the new government. So she's hiding her past from him. So that's my book. And then Rachel, I'll let you talk about your book before we talk about
I
Golden
like those kind of books though, because I those are the type I like to watch even on Netflix and stuff. A little bit of espionage, a little suspense, a little bit of like, what's happening. Although, pause. I will probably delete this from the podcast because I don't want to offend anybody out there. But we're recently watching this show called The Madness on Netflix.
I haven't seen it.
1 out of 10, maybe.
Oh, no.
Just because the intro is nice.
1
story
star
is-
because the intro's nice.
the
0
story
stars.
My husband's like, I don't even like. My girl's like, why are you guys finishing it? They're literally like, what's making you finish this? They're like, we're in this hustle to like finish the
Hustle
thing. And
culture.
they're like, why? Yes. Like, why are
You're
you
a bad
finishing it?
person.
Have to.
That's funny.
Sorry. Side notes.
It's fine. So I write Why Choose Mafia Romance, which is a very specific niche. But basically that is a mafia romance is like action packed, sexy romance. And then Why Choose is a one girl with multiple partners. So it's called Blood. My first book is called Blood in the Water. And my second book is called Only Fools Rush In. And both are on Amazon and Kindle Unlimited. And they're about a girl who's a mafia princess. So she's, her father has a mafia empire, and her first love murders him and steals her legacy out from underneath her. So she goes on this quest for revenge, and hires this group of assassins to basically take him out. And it's 4 books planned in the series. I'm working on the 3rd right now, and hopefully that will come out in the summer or fall. We'll see.
Nice.
In my anti-hustle writing life, I don't attach a publishing date until after the first draft is finished, because otherwise it just
Right.
creates like way too much pressure and shame
Anxiety.
and anxiety for
Yeah.
me. So I have like a pre-order up that's got a loose date, but I'm like, whatever. Anti-hustle means that I take care of my what pressure I'm going to put on myself. So yeah, you can find those on Amazon. It's the Shadows Syndicate series. That's what it's called.
Nice.
And
all those
did you
things
say
into-
R.E. May? Because they're
R.E.
slightly
May.
different.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
that's the name I publish under. R.E. May.
Okay. Yeah, I will put those on the show notes too. And then what is
Awesome.
so the podcast is called Story Magic.
Yes.
And you're only on Apple Podcast?
We're
No,
on
we're
Spotify too.
you're on Spotify
We're
too?
on all of the Spotify and Google.
I don't know that we're on
Podcasts. Is
Google
that-
anymore. Google went through
Google's
this weird
not a
thing.
I don't know what
Yeah.
they're doing. Yeah, I
Okay.
think
No,
I got
just-
an email. Yeah, I got an email saying like, that's not a thing anymore because it wasn't
Exactly.
even loading very well. So I feel like they just kind of did away with it, and I was like, that's good too. Nobody
Yeah.
really goes there.
Apple and
Story
Spotify.
Magic. Yep, Apple and
Yeah, I guess
Spotify. We
I had a
talk.
hard time finding you on the other ones. I found you easily on the Apple podcast one. That's the one I listened to, but I'll have to go and follow you on the other ones too.
Nice. Awesome. Thank you.
Because I definitely have tried to find you there. But did you say Harper Lee was the book you were talking about?
That's the only one I could think of where like she wrote her second
Kill
book
a
like a million
Mockingbird.
years. Yeah.
That's it. So it wasn't the name of the author wasn't in my head. It was the name of the book.
I couldn't think of the name of the book for some reason. It was very
To Kill a
strange.
Mockingbird.
Went
Yeah.
straight to her name. Yeah, so Story Magic is where you'll find like us talking about all things writing. We talk about mindset a lot, but we also talk about craft. We get real nerdy about character development, plot structure, show don't tell, all the things. And then and we do one-on-one book coaching, and we have our lifetime access community, Tenacious Writing, which has everything you need to build a sustainable writing life that you love.
People can go to your website to find that information.
Yep,
Yep, and that's golden.
goldenmayediting.com. Yeah, you got it.
Say it again, just so when I go to edit this, I can
goldenmayediting.com.
Perfect. Oh, perfect. It has been a blast having you
Thank you.
on here. You ladies are extremely informative, like versed in all the facets of writing, which is what we like to do. Is that's the purpose of
Passionate,
the purpose of our
energetic.
podcast is to talk, even if we don't know the answers. Have the people who do, the people who maybe have the opinions of a certain topic, and how can we help authors. And so there is that community of people like, I need inspiration. So these are the type of things we'd like to have in our episodes. You have a great list of episodes as well for yourselves that I love. Your topics, you have great topics. So definitely suggest people go over there and listen. And you can obviously network with other podcast people. You can listen to more than one podcast when it comes to writing.
All the
Well, it's like I
podcasts.
say in the music world. I mean, there are millions and millions of singers, but there are only thousands of coaches. You're not going to lose. Trust me, people. Go to all these podcasts. You're not offending anybody, or you're not costing us any listeners. This is a big world. You
Yes.
want to grow. If you want to be an author, dive deep, have fun.
Yeah.
And if you could
Yeah.
take something from everybody, you are just you're just like your toolbox is increasing, and that just makes you a better person to resist hustle culture.
Yes. Yes, exactly.
Full circle.
But if
Love
you'd like to follow us on any of our socials, you can go to alwayswritepodcast.com. Click on any of those little icons there on our website. It'll take you to our YouTube channel, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Music. You can try to follow us on our socials, although we usually only post on Facebook and Instagram. I'm not a Twitter person. I don't do TikTok. So they're there, but we don't really use them. And then if you'd like to email us, if you have questions or you have comments or you have something you'd like to say to Rachel and Emily, we can send that and forward that to them as well. And as always, we're so grateful. I can't even talk. So grateful that you're
We're
listening.
very grateful.
We're very grateful that you're watching this episode.
I'm hunting rabbits. Okay.
Anyways, so thank you for listening. And as always, I'm author Carissa DeLay.
And I'm Jamie Vindela.
And thank you, Emily. And thank you, Rachel, for coming on. Until next time, always write.
Thank